Today, we're talking about The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. I'm going to be chatting with Kelsey Lang. Kelsey and I are so excited to be chatting about this book because we love it so much. It's a poignant read by Rebecca Yarros. And Kelsey got into it a couple months ago, and she told me, she was like, you got to read this book. And so we're so excited to be sharing this book with you today. Thank you, Kelsey, so much for being here today. Welcome.
Th- Thank you. I'm literally so excited. I've been thinking about this all week.
I know we've been chatting about it for a long, long time. Um,
Yes.
but before we get into the things we leave unfinished, which I know we both cannot stop talking about, and people are probably so sick of hearing us talk about it.
So
But
sick.
now we'll have like a podcast episode, and we could say like, oh, you know
Mhm.
what, just go listen to the episode because we're just like repeating ourselves at this point. Tell
Yes.
me a little bit about
Very true.
yourself. Tell me about your how you got into reading. Have you always been a reader? Like, what's your story? Like, what do you do? Like, what's your thing?
Yes. Have always been a reader from a young age. I am actually a teacher now. Live in the Midwest. Love to lose myself in fictional places. What's funny, because I was thinking about this question. I know you asked your first podcast guest on your episode last week, and I thought, when did I like have my little reading hiatus? Because I feel like there are so many people on Bookstagram who like read a lot as a kid, took a long break, and then got back into it. So that definitely happened to me. The last big series I read before my break was Twilight. The
Oh, that's a
Twilight
lot.
universe
Yeah, that's a
a
lot. That's a
long time ago.
a long time ago.
A long time ago. That was like my thing in high school. It like became my obsession. And then, I went to college, got my first adult job, life changed, priorities changed. I stopped reading for a long time, but got back into it a couple of years ago, which I know you're going to be shocked by this. It was the ACOTAR series.
Yep.
But a coworker of mine was like hell bent on getting everyone she knew to read this series. I did. It sucked me back in. And like 2 years later, here we are. I have a Bookstagram now. I'm like, who am I? Who
Right.
am I?
Well, look at me. Like,
I know.
who am
Look
I?
at you. Look at us.
Look at us. I mean, same. I shared it with on the first episode. Um, I have heard so many stories, and I said this before about people getting into reading with Akatar. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like it just like changes people's lives. Same
It
thing for
did.
me. I got into it. I got back into reading too. From reading Akatar. So, um,
Mhm.
I know we're doing a reread of that coming up, so I'm excited for
Yes.
that too. Um, so what are you currently reading? Like, what are you into these days? What are you anything fun coming
Mm,
up or anything you just finished? Like, what do you got going on? What's on your TBR?
well, so, okay, I'm in the middle of a series right now, actually. Megan Quinn is one of my favorite romance authors, and she has a million books, so I have a ways to go. She's on my TBR forever. But I'm in the middle of her Vancouver Agitator series right now, so it's a hockey romance series, which,
Okay.
I will never tire of a hockey romance. I'm on book 3, which is called Right Man, Right Time. And the first 2 are really good, but this one is like giving me life, and it's totally gonna be a 5-star read. It's like a fake dating story with an age gap and, like I said, hockey, obviously. I'm so obsessed with it that I'm like, I have to finish the whole series before I move on to something else. So that's what I'm in the
Right,
middle
right,
of right now.
right.
But as you know, because we've discussed, we've got Onyx Storm coming out.
Yes, Onyx Storm.
Onyx Storm, so I'm
Like
thinking,
soon.
ah, so
Days away.
soon. I'm having a little bit of anxiety because I I was so devastated by the ending of Iron Flame,
I
and I'm like,
know.
"What are you gonna bring in us now,
I
Rebecca?
know. I
What are
know.
you
I
gonna
know.
do
I
to
think
us?"
everyone's like low key nervous about
Mhm.
what's gonna happen. I'm holding out hope that or holding on to hope that she's gonna do us right. She's gonna write it all. She's gonna write it all because right now it's not all right.
Well, as we will get into when we talk about the things we leave unfinished, she's very unpredictable,
She is.
and she throws a lot of curveballs at you, so I feel like nothing's safe. I actually heard her say in an interview once, like, you know, something to the effect of, "If you fall in love with someone, like, sorry," or like, basically, I can't protect your heart from things that could happen. So she's ruthless,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Well,
we love
yeah,
her.
and we'll get into yes, and we'll get into the things we leave unfinished in a second because we know that
Mhm.
that tore me up. Um, but yes, I'm so excited. I'm glad you mentioned Onyx Storm. I am actually I mean, I'm so did you have you done rereads for that? Like with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame recently?
I not it was over the summer, so,
Oh, okay, so it's been a hot minute.
it's been a hot minute. So I'm sure there's some things that I won't remember in full detail,
Right,
but,
right, right. But it's okay. You
um,
know
it's okay.
the
I
big
know the big
story.
plot point.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
know that what the cliffhanger was, so we'll just get into it. And then I'll be going to the event in St. Louis. Rebecca Yarros is coming. So that's where I
Oh,
live
right.
in St.
Yep.
Louis.
Yep.
And she added a tour stop here, and I feel like I'm still dreaming over that. But
Yes.
managed to get a ticket, so that's just gonna be such an
Yay.
honor to hear her talk.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I love her. I'm excited. I did a reread. So I read both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame last year, and
Yep.
um, I think I shared this on last week's episode. Iron Flame for me, like, I almost DNF'd it. I know people were like, "What?" Like, I really struggled with the first half of Iron Flame because coming out of Fourth Wing, there was a lot of
Uh-huh.
action and it was just, like, so great. And then for me, Iron Flame was a little slow and I was like, "I don't know about this," but everyone was like, stick with it, it's so good." And it was, of course it was.
Part
And,
2 Part 2 was
yeah,
action-packed.
yes, yes,
Oh,
exactly. Um,
uh-huh.
and I was not ready for that ending. I was kinda like, "Wait, where's the rest of the book? Like, what where where's
It
is there
it
more?"
was a cliffhanger.
It's such a cliffhanger. I was like, "Is there a bonus chapter? Like, what are we done? Is that it? Like, what
Oh
am I supposed to do
gosh.
with that?"
We're in
Um,
for a wild ride.
oh my gosh, I know. So I'm really so looking forward to Onyx Storm coming out shortly. Um, and I know we'll be reading I for book club, I didn't even, like, do a vote. I was just like, "You know what? Everyone wants to do
I know, I saw that email,
wants
and it's like, is it
wants."
even a question? Like, of
It's
course
not a
we're reading
it's not
Onyx
a question.
Storm.
No one needs to vote. We don't need to vote on that. Like, we all know we're gonna read Onyx Storm. Like, let's just do it.
And that's
Um,
also the book club pick for my school's book club as
I'm
well.
sure it's a book club pick
Everyone's
for,
just
like,
like, it's
is it
Onyx
a
Storm.
question, as I said?
No,
Is it even
no.
a question? Everyone knows it's Onyx Storm, so let's not even bother with the votes.
Nope.
But anyway, I am currently reading what am I reading? I'm reading, The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. I know I
Okay.
texted you the other day about
Mhm.
that one. That's actually our bonus book for book club this month, which we're meeting tomorrow, and I have to finish it because 'cause I'm not done. I'm only, like, 60% in, oh my gosh. Um, but I'll do it anyway, I'm not worried about it, but it's good so far, I like it. It's kind of like it's magical realism, a little bit of time travel not really time travel, it's an interesting book, definitely different, um, but so I'm enjoying it so far, and, I also just finished what was the other one that we had? Oh,
Intermezzo, right?
Intermezzo. Yeah, I just
What
finished
did
that
you
too.
think of that?
That was an interesting book. I know there was a lot of opinions about that book. I actually think it was up for a Goodreads it was up for a Goodreads award in 2024,
Oh,
just recently.
nice.
I don't know if it won for its category. It might have been fiction, I think it was fiction. Um, but, maybe it won, I can't remember. But anyway, I could see why people love it. Um, for me, I think it's a 3-star read, only because, uh, I don't know, it's very different, but there were a lot of, uh, serious, like, storylines, like, ideas and thoughts, and, there was a lot it was really about grief. The book is about grief, um, and how people deal with grief, and, it's these 2 men now, they're men, and, one is, like, 22, one's, like, 30 they're, like, brothers, and they're, like, 22 and I think 32, something like that, and they live in Ireland, and, their father died, and so it's how they're handling that grief and their romantic relationships. It's really has to do with their romantic relationships during this time in their lives, which, they're dealing with this grief, and it's just, there's a lot of, like, suicidal ideation and thoughts, and, um,
So it's a
it's
heavy
just
book.
deep. It's a heavy book. It's a heavy book, and I can see why people love it because Sally Rooney is talking about topics that are, they're deep, they're heavy, and good for her for bringing them up.
I
Good for
agree.
her for talking about mental health because it's a lot of mental health and, sort of taboo relationships. So it's just a very interesting book. As I said, for me, I think it was 3-star read, but I definitely would recommend it because it's different and it does talk about, it has to do with mental health and grief in all is really what it's about, grief. Um, but that wasn't what the question was it? It was more about what I'm currently reading. I only had that in my head because I just finished it. Um,
Yeah.
I'm currently reading, as I said, The Book of Doors, and yeah, just trying to finish up that one. So I'm almost done. I do like it so far. I think I'm looking forward to seeing the ending of that one. So, and then we have our ACOTAR read coming up, which I'm
Oh,
excited for that.
love it.
So I have been waiting to reread that forever, like, since last year, and SJM needs to just she needs to we're waiting.
We're
Where
waiting.
are
If
you?
anything, just a release date.
Like,
A
give us
release date. Something to, like,
yeah.
mark on the calendar and plan our
Did you
life
see
around.
I know. Did you see the post that she did the other oh, no, she was tagged in there, she was a collaborator. Um, it was like her book publishing house, they're doing like a limited edition
Oh,
ACOTAR.
yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
those?
Uh-huh.
And when I saw 'cause, obviously I follow her because, like, the whole world does. When I saw her name, I was like, "We have a release date, we have a release date." I was so excited, and I'm, like, looking
Aw.
at the and I'm like, "It's just
I think
the limited edition."
the last post Sarah herself made in regards to the next ACOTAR book, I think it was back in April of 24. I remember it was a picture of her standing, like, in front of a
Yes,
mountain landscape,
yes,
and she was working actively on the book, and I'm like,
yes.
"That feels like forever ago."
I think she said something like and this is sad that I know what she said in that post. I think she said something like, "Heading up north to write for a while," or
Yes,
something like that. I mean, how do I know that? I'm such a
it's
creeper.
because Sabrina, don't lie, we have both stalked her page numerous times looking for
Like,
updates, and
just
we've
looking
read
for
that post enough
anything.
times.
Oh
Anything,
my god.
Sarah. Anywho, but yes, we're gonna
Sarah,
do 1
can
book
you
a month.
please yes, just help a sister out. Help us out. We need something. I really hope she gives us
It'll
something.
come. It'll come.
I'm, like, dying. I'm, like, slow it's like a slow death. It's like a slow death.
But you know it'll be a good one if she's taking this much time.
I know, I
It's gonna
know,
be a
I know.
long book,
Yeah,
and it'll be yeah,
yeah.
anywho, but
It'll
we'll
probably be,
get
like,
into that.
1,000 pages. Like,
That'd
her
be
Crescent
great.
City books were, like, ginormous,
Oh, yeah.
which I
I would not
loved.
complain about a 1,000-page ACOTAR book.
No,
I
I wouldn't
really
either.
wouldn't,
But,
especially if
it's
it's
gonna
about Azriel.
yeah, yeah. I know. We have thoughts about that, but we won't get into that today
We'll get into
because
that next time.
we'll get into it next time because if we start down that rabbit, it's gonna lead us in a rabbit hole, and
Mhm.
we are never gonna get to what the people want, which is the things we leave unfinished. Yeah.
Is this not the most beautiful book for anyone who's watching, they'll see the book cover I'm holding up. It's such a
Yes,
beautiful
it is.
image.
It's
Gosh,
such a good
Rebecca.
book. So, okay. So, like, a little backstory here. I've had or I had that book on my TBR, like, literally all year last year. It was on my TBR. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna read it, I'm gonna read it." And I just never got to it because, you just
Because our
just
TBRs are endless.
because our TBRs are just like, forget it. So, and then you had mentioned actually, I think it was during book club, you were when we were talking about what we're currently reading, I think you mentioned it. You was like, "Oh, I'm reading this book by Rebecca Yarros, da da da." And you were telling us about it, and I was like, "Okay, cool, right?" And then I think you might have posted it, or I don't remember what it was, but you were just so caught
I
up.
posted about it incessantly. I'm like, people are gonna be like so over it. So I'm glad we get to talk about it here because everyone else in my real life is like, okay, Kelsey,
They're like,
we get it.
we get
We
it,
get
we
it.
get it." Yeah, no,
Well, let me tell you, Sabrina, that book showed up on my Audible. That's how I came across it. Okay. I ran out of my
Mm.
Audible credit because I'm crazy and they're supposed to last you a year. And I got through it in like 2 months buying all these books. And I was just surfing through. I'm like, okay, I need a book that's free on Audible because a lot are included. And I just came across this one by Rebecca. And I'm like, oh yeah, she has a lot of romance stories. I haven't read any of those. I had just read her Empyrean series at the time. So I'm like, I'll check it out. So this book was included in Audible. I never expected that when I started listening to it, it would change my life and
Yes.
like
Yes.
just cause me to think about things differently. It is such an impactful book that I was not prepared for,
Mhm.
which is why I've been so crazy telling the world to read it. I'm so glad you finally took me up on it and some other people did too. And they were like, okay, we get it. We get it now.
Yes. Okay, we get it. You told me to read it. Saw all your posts and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna do it." And I know when I told you, um, that I was gonna read it, you were like, "Okay, you're gonna need, like, a support person."
Yes.
And you were like, like, live text me and tell me, like, where you are and what's going on. And I was reading it like, "Oh my gosh." And, it started out, um so first of all, everyone knows Rebecca Yarros from Fourth Wing, obviously.
Mhm.
We all know her and love her. But she started out, I believe, as a romance writer, and
Did.
then she did Fourth Wing, which what? How?
Yeah,
I mean,
you're correct.
like, what? So and I hadn't read any of her romance novels, until this one, The Things We Leave Unfinished, and then after I finished it, I was like, "I need more," and I actually have a variation, which she just wrote, but I also love that one.
Mhm.
Anyway, see, I'm getting off topic. Um, so she writes a lot of, like, military, um, because her husband was I think he's a vet, and they travel a lot, um, you know, all over for duty stations and things like that, and deployments and things like that. So she likes all the military stuff, and she writes about the military, which I love because, as you know, I'm also a military veteran, and so I understand, I've been deployed and I've done all the duty stations and all the traveling, so I get that. So I love that about her. Um, but I did not know after Fourth Wing, which we also know is based, it's in a military college.
Yes,
I didn't know that she had all these romance novels that are so beautiful. Like, she's a beautiful writer, and
she is.
this book was just crazy because, well, why don't you um tell us a little backstory. What is the book about? And by the way, if you guys have not read this book, there will be spoilers, because we're doing a review. So, we're going to be talking about things that you may not want to hear if you haven't read it. So, if you haven't read it and you don't want to be spoiled, or you don't want us to spoil it for you, then you should probably come back to this episode. Um,
Yes.
so go ahead. Do you want to share?
Okay, yeah, sure. So, um, this story is told in like a dual timeline format. So you're actually following 2 relationships. You're following the first relationship is Georgia and Noah, and they're like present day. And then the other relationship is Scarlett and Jameson, who it's during World War II time. Um, so you've got a present day romance and a wartime romance. And Scarlett is actually Georgia's great grandmother. So the basic premise of the story is that Scarlett was a romance writer and she passed away and she had this unfinished book and they're looking for someone to finish the book. And that's where this guy Noah comes in. He's an author. He and Georgia like enemies at first sight. Um, so just over the course of the story, Noah's working on this ending to the story Scarlett started. And meanwhile, Georgia is like finding all these love letters between Scarlett and Jameson from back in the day. Um, and in my opinion, the summary, like if you just look up the summary of the book, it's all about Noah and Georgia. There's like a little mention of like, oh, this wartime romance, But I would argue that the bulk of the story is actually about Scarlett and Jameson. It's really their love story that's the prominent one. Um, and it's an incredible love story with an ending that people probably wouldn't expect. And there's some twists in
Right.
there that we're going to talk about. But that's the general idea of the story.
Yes. So, all right, let's get into a couple of questions and then we'll kind of get into it. Let me see what we have here. So you mentioned Scarlett. There's a dual sort of love story going on. It's
Hmm.
Scarlett and Jameson in World War II era, and then there's Noah and Georgia in the present. So which love story were I'm so interested in, I kind of know you. I think I know what you're going to say, but which love story were you most invested in? Scarlett and Jameson's in the past or Noah and Georgia in the present?
Scarlett and Jameson,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Not that Noah and Georgia weren't cute. They were. It was like, I feel like they sort of followed an enemies to lovers little trope. Um, but I think I was so drawn into Scarlett's romance with Jameson because it was just so passionate. And I think not that we want to like romanticize war, but in war times, those relationships were so dear to people because, you weren't promised the next day.
Right.
Um, and it was unique in that Scarlett and Jameson were both serving in the war. Um, and it was great because I feel like I don't know if you would agree, but I feel like Scarlett kind of played a little hard to get
She did.
in
She
the
did.
beginning. She knew Jameson wanted to pursue her, and
Right.
it was just so
And as
cute.
you mentioned, she was an officer too. She
Mhm.
was in the military. So I don't know if you mentioned that, but she wasn't a civilian.
Yes, they were both
She was
they were both
they were both
serving.
serving. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, correct. He was the pilot, one of the
He was a
pilots.
pilot, right.
Yes. So I just the way they fell in love and the way Rebecca told their story, how could you not be sucked in?
Right.
So, I'm
Right.
very happy that Noah and George got together, but, Scarlett's story just blew me away. What about you? Did you prefer one over the other?
So, at first, I preferred Noah and Georgia's because I think, and for me, I think because they're more contemporary in my head because it's in the present. So I was able to relate to them more because they were present day. So I was like, well, and they live in, well, so Georgia, we know they both live in New York, but and obviously I'm from New York, and so I there's that um in the present day. And then but Georgia leaves New York or she moves to Colorado after she divorces her husband. So um and I've been divorced. So I don't know, I just related to their story a little bit
That makes
more at
sense.
first because there were just more parallels to my life. And so I was like, I was rooting for them, but at the same time they have some issues there. She's a little they're both kind of difficult in their own way. Um, but as I was reading more about Scarlett and Jameson and, you know, I don't know, just reading about their story and how they met and then all the things that they were going through and, then like he was, you know, they were like apart because of the military, so they weren't even serving on the same base anymore. And I have personally lived that because I've been deployed and been in relationships before where I was apart from,
Yeah.
my partner and I know how that feels. And so I started to feel their story. I started to feel the emotions that they were going through and the emotions that they were describing because I was like, here they are in love and they're like not with they're not together. They're apart. They're serving apart and I have experienced that. So I think for me that was initially the draw with Scarlett and Jameson. Obviously they were soldiers, they were in the military and now they're kind of apart and they would come apart and then come back together, come apart, it's and that's how it works. Like that's how it is. So I ended up loving Scarlett and Jameson's I mean, I loved Noah and Georgia too. I really did. I'm not gonna lie. But I think Scarlett and Jameson broke me. That was
They
that was the
broke
breaking.
me.
That was the
Yes.
breaking. That was
Destroyed.
the destroy
Destroyed.
yeah, that was I couldn't I was like Oh my gosh, yeah, that was hard. So, um, I don't know, should we talk about kind of
I
what
feel like we need to talk
happened?
about the twist. I feel like you have to talk about the twist next because
Yeah,
just looking at the questions we kind of have gathered, I just feel like that one makes the most.
yep,
Plus, we have to introduce Constance.
yes, yeah. So Constance
We
is
have to mention
Scarlett's
her.
sister.
Mhm.
They're both
Who
serving.
also served. Yeah.
They're both yep, they're both serving, so they're all in the military, which I love, by the way. Um, and so yeah, so Scarlett and Constance, main characters, main characters. And at first we think it's just Scarlett and Jameson, but then we learn later that obviously Constance is a big player
A big
in
part
this
of the
big part of this
tale.
story, which
Mhm.
we didn't really understand in the beginning. So, I'll start off with I'll say that um Scarlett and Jameson ended up getting married
Yep.
and they got pregnant. And so she was pregnant and they were going to have this baby. Um and I have to say one of the earlier on in the story, I mean it wasn't too early on, but before like the whole twist and everything came up and the whole like plot twist, I was so sad when Scarlett had to, because in the military, I guess back then, once you reach a certain um point in your pregnancy, you can no longer serve.
Mhm.
And she loved serving. She loved being an officer in the military, and she was, like, kinda trying to hide it, but they knew, like, her superior officers knew, and they were gracious about it, but, when she had to go in and tell her superior officer that she was leaving, that because she was pregnant, so she had to resign from the military, um, that broke me. That was really hard because I felt like, "That is so unfair." You know, she's serving. She's, like, serving her country, and she has to walk in here, and she can't serve anymore because she's pregnant? Like, what? That is so unfair. So that part right there was really hard for me. I'm getting a little emotional right now. I was a little upset, but not at Rebecca Yarros. She's just
She's
writing
just
the
telling the
story.
story.
She's just telling the
Yeah.
story. But I was like, that's not fair. Like, what, not that's not okay. But anyway, that's the way it was. Um, so anyway, they're pregnant, they're having a baby, and the story kind of takes off from there. Like, they're married now, they are
Mhm.
expecting a baby. She had to resign from the military. I can't remember at this point if Jameson is with her. I think there's some points where he's living with her, and then there's some points where he's apart. They're
Where he's
apart,
away.
where he's
But
away
he but
on
he
missions.
was but he was there, like, she gave birth to the baby,
Right,
like, I think but he came home to see the baby, like, within, like,
right.
a couple of days. So he got to, you know, they enjoyed that together. But then, yeah, she had to continue staying home and he kept peeling off. And I just think too, as a new mom, that had to be hard. Like
Yep,
your other half is not there to support you all of the time. So she was going
right.
through a lot.
She was going through a lot. Um, so let's talk about the plot twist. Let's talk about the
Okay.
plot twist. I don't know how you I'll let you tackle that one. Because
Okay.
up until this point, this is how we are. Like, there's World War II. We have this pilot who's fallen in love with this woman, this other officer who is Scarlett. She's got a sister.
Hmm.
They're both serving together in the same sort of battalion. Um, and her sister's name is Constance. And
Yeah.
now Scarlett and Jameson are married, they're pregnant, they just had a baby, um, and that's kind of where we are. Big picture, obviously, there's a lot of other things that are going on, but big picture,
Yeah.
that's kinda where we are. And there's a lot of bombings and things like that happening
Oh
because,
yeah. Air raids
it's World War II. Air
constantly.
raids, yep,
So Constance becomes a big part, and this is you have to know about her because she's part of the plot twist. She's a big part of the story. She had her own kind of heartbreak when her longtime lover was killed during the war. Um, so she and Scarlett just remained very close, and so she was there to help when baby William was born and everything. And it got to a point where Jameson goes missing, right?
right.
So, and I mean, again, this is a spoilers podcast. So, like, as soon as I read that he was missing, I knew. I'm like, he's gone. And I'm
Right,
devastated. And I
right,
think Scarlett knew that too.
right,
But Georgia, going back to her for a second, because again, she's learning about everything that happened through these letters. So she comes to know that, like, Constance died back in the wartime because there was an air raid. Constance passed away. Um, but in actuality, Scarlett and Constance were trying to escape. They were trying to get, I believe they were trying to get Scarlett on a plane to Colorado to go be with Jameson's family because
right,
Jameson was
because I think
gone.
Jameson had told her, "If anything happens
Yes,
to me, you need to leave,
go to
and
my
my uncle's
family.
gonna come and get you and take you to Colorado
Yes,
to be safe with the baby. I don't want you to stay here with the air raids and, with all this stuff going on. So if something happens to me, you need to leave." She didn't want to, but of course, I mean, we know that he's
right.
gone missing, and so Constance has gone to pick her up and, like, they're in a
And
car and
help her
help
get
her
there.
to go to the airfield so that she can escape and go to Colorado, to safety with her
With her
son,
baby.
with her baby.
And then they get stuck in another air raid. They had to, like, get out of their car and try to take shelter, but then bombs were dropping. So you get to a point in the story, and this is when, by the way, I was, like, sitting in a Costco parking lot on the edge of my seat, neglecting my grocery shopping because this part was
Oh my gosh,
happening, and
I've
I'm
been
like,
there.
"Oh my gosh." And then the chapter and the chapter is basically like, "Okay, Constance is dead." Like, they both got, you know, this bomb fell, there's all the rubble. Scarlett is, like, holding her sister Constance, who's very clearly dying, and then she dies, and that was me. That's what I listened to sitting in a parking spot, and I was like, "Oh my
Right.
god. Oh my god."
Right, they're like
Later,
I think Scarlett's, like, holding the baby, or she picked up the baby
yep,
and the
she's
baby might have
holding
had
her
blood from one of
baby.
them.
Her baby's
It
there,
was,
and then
like,
Constance is dead.
it was so emotional because she saw blood on the baby. She didn't know if the baby was bleeding, like, what's going on,
Yeah,
but then she realized, like, it was
it's
Constance that was
Constance's blood.
bleeding, and
Yeah,
it was her blood, and, so here you have they're on the airfield trying to make this escape to get away from the air raid, and they've been hit by an air raid, and they're just on the airfield now, and, you know,
yep.
Constance is dying.
So that broke me, and then that this you guys listen, this is the part where we say, like, your heart breaks, and then it sorta gets glued back together, and then it breaks again because 'cause you're like, "Okay, Constance is dead, devastating. Scarlett still has to move on." But no, in one of the letters, that's when Georgia finds out the big plot twist, which is it
Yes.
was actually Scarlett that died on that
Right,
airfield, and
right,
Constance had the baby. So the twist is, a woman and a baby did travel to Colorado to be with
right.
Jameson's family, but that woman was Constance, and she adopted Scarlett's identity. I mean, within 60 seconds, because I think the guy
Right.
showed up, the uncle, to take her,
Yes.
and Scarlett had. I think Constance was the baby's godmother, so of course Scarlett's like, protect
Right.
him with your life, whatever you need to do. So she had about 60 seconds to be like, to process, my sister is dead.
Yep.
I have to take this baby.
Yes.
And just talking about it on this podcast, it may not seem like, "Oh my gosh," but, like, if you've read the book, that came way out of left field.
Way
I
out
was
of left field.
not expecting that. I don't think
Right.
anyone could have
No,
predicted
I
that.
was even texting you at the time. I was doing the live text because I
Yes,
needed
you were.
I needed a wingman. I needed a wingman. Um, it was like I don't know that I had a moment where I had a feeling when they were on the airfield
You
where
had a
I was
feeling
like,
for
"What's happening
sure.
right now? Like, who's
Mhm.
dying? What's going on? Is the baby dead? Like, what are we doing?" And I had a moment where I was like, "Hold up, wait a minute. Did Constance just die or was it Scarlett?" And I think I texted you like, "What is
I was like,
happening?"
"Oh, I can't say
I was like,
anything."
"I
I was like,
think
"Keep going, Sabrina."
I think Scarlett is not Scarlett. I think Scarlett is Constance." And I was like, "But don't tell me." Like, just hold on a second. Um,
Oh my
I was
gosh.
like, "Oh my gosh." But the crazy thing is too, is that as you said, she had like literally like half a second to decide what she was gonna do because the uncle, Jameson's uncle came to pick her up. to bring her, or I think it was Jameson's uncle. Somebody came to bring her to the air, to bring her to the plane or the helicopter, whatever it was. I think it was the plane. Um, to bring her back to Colorado, to bring her to Colorado.
Mhm.
She's not American. Um, and and now we know Scarlett is dead, and Constance had to decide very quickly what she was gonna do. And there were only papers for Scarlett. Constance didn't have papers.
Mhm.
Um, so she made a really quick decision to she took her sister's papers, and she and the baby went to Colorado. And the crazy part is that now Georgia is reading these letters all these years later. And by the way, her great grandmother like pretty much raised her because her mother wasn't around a lot. She was in and out. So her great grandmother being Scarlett, who was a writer, who's a writer.
Was
Present
actually
day, she's a present day writer.
yeah,
She survived. She moved back, or she moved to Colorado with the baby, and now she's become a writer, and she is raising, her great granddaughter. Because her mom wasn't around all the time, and that's a whole other story. We
yeah.
won't
We
really
don't need
get
to get into
into.
that.
We don't need to get
But
into
yeah,
that, um, but now, Georgia is realizing that Scarlett, her grandmother, is not
it's Scarlet,
Scarlett.
it's
It's
Constance.
Constance.
And can you just
Her
imagine Sabrina? She's the only one who ever knew that. Constance never told the man she ended up marrying, Brian. She never told
Right,
William, who baby William, who grew up, was her nephew, but she raised
right.
as her son. No, she never told a soul. Can you even imagine how
No,
lonely
I know.
that must have felt?
I know. Just living this life where you're not who you're not you will never again be Constance. You will
No.
never again be called Constance. You can never acknowledge that. Um, that is, like, so deep, and, it just really tore me apart. I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, not only
It
now is Jameson, missing or dead, presumed dead, um, but now we have Scarlett who's dead, and it's, the baby William. It's not even his parent now. He's not even being raised by his parents now, it's by his aunt.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know, it just the whole thing was just it was so much. It was
Well,
so
and
emotional.
you do grow to get pretty attached to Constance as well. She actually is a pretty big part of the story. Her and like I said, she has her own heartbreak with her lover that was
Right.
killed. And then if you remember, she ended up I think she was like engaged to this really awful abusive man that her parents
Yes.
wanted her to marry.
Right.
Um so she has had her own share of hardships and then to
Mhm.
to take on a new identity like that. Honestly, at the end of the book, aside from wanting to just sit and rot on the couch because I was like, "What did
I
how do I
know.
move on with my life?"
Such a book
I
hangover.
wanted I wanted to, like, immediately find my sister and just give her the most giant hug, and
Mhm.
I thought about that. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what if that was my life and something terrible happened to my sister who I love so much?" And, like, if you have do you have siblings?
I do have a sister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it made my heart hurt so much.
Yeah.
It was like love and heartbreak at the same time.
Yes.
'Cause I feel like the book is as much it's obviously about this incredible love story, but it's also about this, like, bond between sisters and the
Mhm.
sacrifice, and it just rips you apart in so many ways. So
I know, it does. You have the relationship between Scarlett and Constance, which they're sisters. You have the
mhm,
relationship between, I mean, there's a lot, but I'm talking about main plot points. You have the relationship between, Scarlett and Jameson, and then you have the relationship, well, you even have the relationship between Georgia and her mom, which we're not gonna get into today, but there's that's a whole
there's
thing.
stuff there.
You have
That's a
your
thing.
stuff there. Then you have the relationship between Georgia and Noah, who is currently writing the story, um, this story, because, Georgia has these letters that Scarlett or Constance, I guess it's Scarlett, has written. Um,
Well, yeah, the letters are
so
definitely Scarlet's, but
let it yeah, right, the letters are
yeah.
Scarlett, and now Noah's writing, he's a writer, and he's writing the story of her great-grandmother, Scarlett. Um, but And then we have the relationship between, Georgia and her great grandmother, Scarlett or Constance.
Constance.
Um,
And then the
so
one
there's a lot.
between Noah and Georgia. So there's so
Yes.
many relationships you're following.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and the way Rebecca Yarros wrote this book, uh, I just I don't even know. I wonder sometimes how writers come up with you know, their stories. Like, ugh, like, how do you even think of these things? Like, it just I don't know. I don't
I
know.
feel like there has to be some original thought behind these storylines, but I also feel like whether it's your own personal things that have happened to you or have happened to people that you know, like sometimes you get ideas from that and kind of twist it. Well, the other question we had was asking, what do you think the novel says about finding closure or acceptance when something remains incomplete or has an unhappy ending? So I feel like we have to kind of address how this book ended, right?
Yes.
Because Scarlett, aka Constance, was kind of like writing the story. Noah finished. Noah got thrown on because she passed away and the story needed to be finished. And by the way, Noah is supposedly a romance writer, but Georgia sort of chastises him in the beginning, saying, "You're not a romance writer because all of your stories have terribly depressing endings." And,
Right.
that's not what my grandmother was about. She always had these lovey, happy endings. And you'd ask me to check into that, like fact check about the alternate ending, right?
Right.
So if we hop over to Noah and Georgia for a hot second, there was some tension between them because there were two possible ways to end this book. He could make up a happy ending that didn't happen with Scarlett and Jameson, or he could write the truth in something really depressing. And it was very sweet, the relationship between the two of them, because he wrote both endings and he wanted Georgia to pick. And she said she's like realizing she's in love with him. And she's like, I want him to stay true to himself. So write the ending that's the sad ending because she said that's
Right.
authentic. That's what Scarlett
Right.
lived through. So write it. Then he got trashed by those early readers
Yes.
in the story. But he was willing to do that because he loved her. He was willing to throw his career down the drain because he loved
Right.
Georgia. Then when Georgia realized what happened, she's like, "Oh, great.
Right. Everyone
Well,
was
but
basically
I
like
love
trash talking him
trashing
because of
him
because it wasn't a happy ending and everyone wanted a
because it
happy
wasn't a
ending.
happy ending."
Right.
And so then she was sneaky with the publisher and said, "Okay, like for like the bulk publishing, do the happy ending." Because she is like, "Well, I love him and I don't want his career trashed." And he didn't know that. He like woke up and there were all these positive reviews and he's like, "What the heck happened?" So so the very last chapter, as we know in the book, is the alternate ending. Like that's how I read it. That was his
Yes.
alternate ending, the happy
Mhm.
ending. And at first when I read it, I was a little confused because I'm like, wait, what is happening right now? This is not
Right.
real
Right.
life. Then I realized, oh, this is Noah's alternate ending. But it was sweet to me because it felt like almost like they were getting reunited in heaven or something.
Yeah.
It was very
Yep.
symbolic. I
Yep.
don't know. What did you think about that last chapter?
Yeah, so, um, the only thing that for me the way that I sort of found closure for this story, between Scarlett and Jameson was knowing that, or hoping that they were in heaven together. Like, they're together, and I was so sad because baby William didn't have his mom raising him, and, he was
Yeah.
like a little baby, and I was like, "Oh, like his mom." So but for me, I think I sort of came to terms and acceptance with it when I just thought, "You know what? They're together, Scarlett and Jameson, they're together in heaven." And,
Yes.
he had the second best person to raise him, which was Scarlett's sister, Constance. Um, so that being said, the alternate ending that Noah wrote after everyone trashed him for writing the truth about how the story ended, or we assume ended. Um, it was nice. It was nice to read that alternate ending, and I know the masses loved it. They, they were happier
Yes,
because
they
they wanted
did.
their happily ever after. We all do, right? We all want our happily ever after. So, um, they really loved that, and at first I was confused. I was like, "Wait, what's happening?" But it was kinda nice because it was, like, kinda like a yeah, as you said, it was kinda like a they were reuniting, and whether it was just in spirit or in heaven or just somehow they came back
Mhm.
together, and I don't know, I guess it felt good. It felt better than leaving it sort of unknown,
Yeah.
because we never really found out I mean, we assumed he died, but we never really found out what happened to him. Um,
Well, I
and
think
then obviously
we do find that out because remember
we
there
do
was
find out, they confirm
yeah,
it in the end.
at the
We
end.
assume that we
He
know
was
he went down
lost.
on a plane and he probably crashed, but we're not sure, like, is he a POW? Um,
True, true.
Because
We
there
didn't
are
know.
POWs that happen and, we don't know. Like, they come back, they resurface years later. Um, but then I think they confirm it, later on after the alternate ending,
Mhm.
that I think they did find his
His
plane
wedding ring, I believe.
and his
Didn't they
wedding
find
ring.
his
Yep,
wedding ring?
in,
Ugh,
like, the ocean or something like that. So,
yes.
it was kinda
As if you
crazy.
weren't already crushed enough, like, oh my gosh.
I
But
know, they found his wedding ring. Oh my
I
god.
made a note
Yeah.
for myself too to mention though, I think this book, what I appreciate about it as well is it shows the hard truth that sometimes in life there isn't a happy ending
Thank you for
or
saying
you
that.
or you don't get all the answers.
Yep.
Um
Right.
that's I mean, you know me, we just said happy endings, we live for them,
You live for a happy end
but
happy
that's
ending.
not
Right.
always what happens, and I think
Realistic.
that was why this book was such a hard pill to swallow and why I literally laid on my couch
Mhm.
after finishing the story, and I was like, "I don't know what to do with my life now." Like,
Yeah.
I for a good week, my mind was just stuck in the 1940s, and I was thinking about these people fictional people that aren't real,
Right.
impacting my everyday life. Like, when a
But
story
that's why
like
we
that
love
hits
books.
you
Yeah. I did.
so it
I
was
was
a
the same.
five-star. I assume it was a five-star for you.
5 I could if I
Maybe
could do more, I
more,
would. Let's make
right?
up our own rating system. Like, if I could do more, I would. Um,
Infinity stars. That's how I
Infinity
feel.
Stars. It was so good. So, so good. And I think, when I was reading, like, the back of the book kinda thing, I was kinda like, "Maybe I can get into it." But once I read it, I was like, "Oh, oh, okay. Like, this is really good." Like,
I'm telling you, the summary doesn't prepare you for
it
the
doesn't prepare
journey you're
you.
about to embark
It
on.
right, and it also doesn't do the book justice. Like, the
Right.
book is so much more than the summary, and unless you've read it, like, you're not really gonna be able to empathize with what we're saying here because 'cause you're kinda like, "Okay, well, it sounds interesting or not," but
Yeah,
it's just fantastic. It's fantastic storytelling. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. Um, I did list it as one of my top reads for 2024. Um,
agreed.
and it was just so poignant, and I loved it so much. And I love Rebecca Yarros. I obviously love Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and obviously we're getting ready for Onyx Storm. I also read Variation, which I did you read
Yeah,
Variation?
I liked it, but I had some issues with it,
Oh,
but
that's right. We talked about it.
they were
We
more
talked about it.
personal issues, but,
Yes.
overall, great story.
Yeah.
I've read a couple other, of her romance stories, and I have many more to go.
Yep.
So, I have to tell you though, real quick, just to again highlight just the power of books and like making new friends and things like that. I was FaceTiming last night with my friend Silka, who lives in Canada. And I met her because of books.
Mhm.
Um, the reason she and I met is because I read this book, died inside, had zero people to talk to about it because no one else I knew had read it. So I was like, I bet there's a Facebook group for Rebecca Yarros readers. So I went
Oh my
on, found a
gosh.
group, posted just to be like dramatic. Like, is anyone else dying? Like, I need to
Right.
talk
Dying a
about this.
slow death because of this book?
So Silka commented and she and I started a Facebook message thread back and forth about this book.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have someone to talk to." And then now we're just book friends in real life
Right.
and but I'm just like, okay, so a book that changes the way you see things, drives you to the point where you're like, I need friends. I need more friends who can go through this with me. That's why I told you, Sabrina, live text me because I wasn't prepared to go through that alone. And I
I
couldn't
know.
let you do that. I
I
couldn't
know.
let you go through it
No,
alone.
I'm so glad you did because there have been books that we've all done it where there's books that we read that you're like, I need a friend. Like I need
Yes.
who can I is there anybody out there? Like I need to talk to somebody about this book. Like that's what I thought about ACOTAR, by the way.
Yeah.
I was just like, I gotta talk to somebody about this. And my husband was like, not me.
Oh
He
my
was like,
gosh.
after like the fourth book, he was like, girl, can you go find a friend? Can you just go find somebody? Because I can't deal with this. But yes, exactly. I understand. So it's so nice to be able to chat with people because they really have these books, they affect you. Like,
They
and
do.
I mean, sometimes I get book hangovers. I'm just like,
Alright.
what do I do
Oh,
now?
this hangover was rough.
It was
Rough.
rough. What did you recover with? Do you know? Did you take a few days? What did you do?
I mean, like I said, at least a week of me just think
Yeah,
constantly in the headspace of just thinking about it. And
right.
I mean, eventually, like the pain never leaves you, but over
Yeah.
time, it starts to like get a little easier. I don't remember what book I read directly after that, but I'm sure
Mhm.
I had made the decision to dive into a happy one, one that I
Right,
knew would have a
right,
happy ending because I'm like,
right.
my heart is breaking.
Yep,
Gosh. So yeah, now people can know forevermore. This podcast will live forever.
yep.
Um, what an amazing read this is. And
It is.
they should make
Such a
this
good
well, I was about to say, do you think they should make this one? Because they're making one of her other recent releases in the likely event. I think they're making that into a movie.
Oh, are they?
Would would you I can't decide if I would want to see this as a movie or not, or if the book you just could never
I think it's a really strong
I don't
story.
know.
There's a really strong plot here. I mean,
There
it's a
is.
very, very strong story. The plot is crazy good. There's a lot of substance. There's it's an amazing story. So I think it could be a fantastic movie. Um,
It could be like the next Notebook.
I never saw that or read it.
What? Sabrina.
I know.
Oh, I can't
I
even
know.
with you. We'll work on that.
It was kinda like what you said with Twilight, like, you it was like it was before I really got back into reading, so I was like, I don't know, I just never got
But
into it.
surely, I feel like people have seen the movie even if they haven't read the book.
I know, but I haven't seen
All
it.
right,
I don't
well,
know. I
you
know. I have my list. I have my list of
then
things
you need a TBW list to
to
be watched.
be watched.
TBW.
Oh, we should
Go
hashtag that.
watch The Notebook.
TVW. I'm gonna add that to my
TBW.
TVW. Oh, we should totally make that
Mhm.
a hashtag. Anyway, Kelsey, thank you so much for joining me today and agreeing to do this podcast with me. I know we have been dying to talk about it. Like we've chatted about it, but now as you said, we have the podcast. We can forever refer back to it and share it with
Yes.
people so that they don't have to listen to us go on about how much they need to read this freaking book.
Yeah.
They can totally just, you know, refer back to this. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate
having
you.
me. I'm so honored.
Absolutely. You can find Kelsey on Instagram at Plot Up in the Moment. Thank you guys so much for being here. Take care.